Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. It's your weekly program where we dig underneath the headlines and look at what is really going on from a working class perspective here in Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so called United States, and the rest of the world. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. Well, we have a lot of ground to cover on today's program. Most of them Michigan focused stories. It's been a very busy week in Michigan news, and we're going to be breaking down some of what's been going on from recent no-knock raids in the Ann Arbor area targeting anti-genocide protesters to political developments involving Shri Thanedar. I mean, I chuckle a little bit. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you might know why. 'Cause, we're going to break that down a little bit. We've got some coverage of the Patrick Loyola case, as well as some discussion about Elissa Slotkin and her suggestion that Americans are possibly too dumb to know what the word oligarchy means. So we'll be talking about all of that stuff on today's program. I did want to start with something out of here in Kalamazoo, which addresses an issue that is near and dear to my heart, which is housing rights and housing advocacy. This is from an article from WKZO. I will deep dive a little bit into the context of it, but I'll read from the article first. Kalamazoo mayor criticized for not appointing attorney to civil rights board. It was posted by John McNeil on April 8th. Kalamazoo Mayor Dave Anderson is being criticized for refusing to appoint an attorney to the city's civil rights board because of who that lawyer works for. Several members of Isaac complained to the city commission that Lewis Smith could really help the panel with its work, but that he withdrew his application after meeting with Mayor Anderson last week. Smith is the corporation counsel for the Kalamazoo City Commission, and the debate may be over whether that creates professional conflicts. Resident Jerry Duncan accused the mayor of purposefully trying to control the civil rights panel. Mayor Anderson made no comments, but said he is willing to talk about it. There are apparently 3 unfilled vacancies on the Civil Rights Board, and Isaac would like to see all of them filled. So it's a very short article, but it does have audio accompanying it, so it gives you a little bit of a deeper context of who was saying what and why. I wanted to kind of respond to this because, again, from colleagues I've talked to who are kind of tuned in to the Civil Rights Board and what's going on with that. Let me take you back just a couple of years. I believe it was either the 2017 or 2019 elections. But we had a civil rights board established here to deal with housing, which is the idea was that we would create the civil rights board that could hold landlords and property management accountables if they engaged in housing discrimination. In practice, that's what they would be doing. Now, some of you may not know this, Mayor David Anderson is a landlord himself. And a lot of people have wondered if that actually creates something of a conflict of interest. And kind of, reading between the lines, somewhat Isaac was pointing to was, yes, he's the mayor is not incorrect in saying that this particular lawyer also works for the county, but it's kind of diverting from the fact that there are these vacancies on the civil rights board, which inhibits its ability to engage in cases from citizens of Kalamazoo. It inhibits its ability to again address those issues at the volume that they come in. And again, it seems like a very simple conversation is to make sure that these positions are filled so that the Civil Rights Board can do the kind of housing work that, again, we voted for, that we made possible, us, the people of Kalamazoo created through the power of our vote. And there has been a lot of discussion about whether or not this is being kind of artificially kneecapped, or not given its full power because of interests in the city government who do maybe side more with the landlords than with tenants. And it is worth noting there are several people on the Kalamazoo City Commission, including the mayor, who do function as landlords or own property in that respect. So we will be following up on the story for sure, but it's something that I've heard some discussion about in the community, and I wanted to kind of bring that to all of y'all's ears, so that it's something you can be aware of. And if you think the Housing Civil Rights Board is something important to you, you can always contact the city and put that public pressure on them to make sure those positions are filled and they can have the capacity they need to function the way us, the people of Kalamazoo, want that civil rights board to function. Again, if you want to read that article for yourself and, more importantly, listen to some of the audio from the commission meeting, you can find that at WKZO.com. Kalamazoo mayor criticized for not appointing attorney to civil rights board. It's written by John McNeil, published on April 8th. We will, of course, link to that in the show notes. And then with that, I wanted to, usually we start locally and then kind of move on up. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Canadian politics real quick. We have an important update that I'm going to be talking about here in just a moment. But we're going to take a quick little break first. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers Kalamazoo Podcast. You can find on most podcasting apps as well as on Facebook and YouTube. Give it dialogue. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. I'm your host, Andy Argo. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So the next story we want to talk about is it's technically international, but it's also about a 2.5 hour drive eastward from Kalamazoo. I'm talking about our friends in Canada, and I wanted to talk about the election results that just happened. For those of you who don't know, Canada was just choosing a new prime minister. And something very interesting is happening in Canadian politics that I thought was worth discussing. I'm going to be quoting a little bit from an NPR article. In his victory speech, Mark Carney warns Canadians that Trump is trying to break us. That was published on April 29th, so earlier today. So this is kind of a very fresh story. But I'm going to read a little bit from it, and then I will give y'all a little bit more further context, because again, the whole trajectory of the Canadian election season had a very interesting interface with what's been going on here in the United States. So it starts by saying Mark Carney is staying on as Canada's prime minister, according to projections of the national broadcaster CBC Radio Canada. His top opponent, Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre, Pierre, I can't pronounce that last name. It's very French. I'm not, I need a little practice on that. Lost his own Ontario seat to the Liberals, a post he has held for 20 years. So not only did the Conservative Party not ascend, but the top of their ticket lost their own election. And again, for those who don't, again, the parliamentary system in Canada is a bit different than ours. But it is he basically would have become the leader of the party had they won. But again, he lost his own seat. And what is interesting about this is if you look at polling from just a few months ago, November, December, even early January. It was looking like it was going to be very much in the bag for the Canadian Conservative Party. Now let's look a little bit closer at what kind of politics Pierre had, and a little bit a little bit down further in this article, they talk more about that in depth. Pierre was a 45-year-old career politician and head of the Conservative Party, and a stunning reversal of fortunes uh, for Pierre, who had for more than a year rode high in the polls, as I was just saying. At one point, the Conservatives were 27 points over the Liberals. Now that's pretty crazy to think about because you think of even though Trump won in November, but the margins were always like razor thin. It was always very close. We are talking about a major, major swing because, yeah, 27 points, that is an absolute drubbing. That is a thumping, a hammering. That is, again, hands down, the Conservative Party would have just wiped the table. And what was interesting is that Pierre, um, they explicitly cite, and this is something that we talked about on our show too. He was very much using a lot of Trump-like rhetoric. He has the Canada First slogan, talking about border security, tightening the borders, smaller government, not necessarily to the extent mapped out in Project 2025, but again, a very staid conservative talking point, and also echoed a lot of the right wing misinformation and caterwauling on wokeness. But that very same association that again had him ascendant at the time when Trudeau's Liberal Party was extremely unpopular, well, the fortunes reversed shortly after President Trump got into office. And what I really want to point out with this story is, again, I can't underscore how big of a deal that is, that swing. 27 points. That is incredible. That is an almost unheard of swing in global politics. And I do want to also caution Mark Carney himself. He's no Claudia Scheinbaum. He's no Bernie Sanders. He's probably more close to the politics of a centrist like Emmanuel Macron, or in an American context, politicians like the Clintons, Joe Biden, etc. But it is an interesting refutation of the type of politics espoused by Donald Trump, only in the sense that, again, when Trump, when Canada was trying to embrace their own form of Trumpism, the conservatives were riding high in the polls. It was not until Donald Trump started attacking Canada that we saw this position flip. And what we heard in a lot of exit polling from Canada is voters were looking for the candidate who would be most assertive in standing up to Donald Trump and the sovereignty of Canada and pushing back against all this rhetoric about Canada being the 51st state and basically this tariff bullying that America has been doing. And and Mark Carney, to his political credit, jumped on that. Has had a lot of strong speeches about Canada's sovereignty and standing up against this idea that Canada is going to get swallowed up or annexed by America. And Carney was able to run that all the way to the bank, which again, that is an inside joke because Mark Carney is also a former banker. So again, not a leftist by any stretch of the imagination. But what it does expose, I think, is a weakness. It is a chink in the armor in the ascendant far right movement that we see. Not just in America, all over the world. It takes a right wing dictator in El Salvador, to threaten American homegrowns with going to a happy little death camp down there. It takes people like Viktor Orban, who, a smarter individual than Donald Trump, who, in a lot of ways, wrote the authoritarian playbook that, for the Trump administration and the Project 2025, drew on very heavily. This is again pointing out that one of the big weaknesses in the ascendant fascist movement is that it ties so much of its politics into these authoritarian strongmen like Donald Trump. But the flip side of that is when they start making really bad or stupid decisions, or decisions that can fragment that coalition. Again, if Trump had just kept his mouth shut, if he hadn't said stupid stuff about Canada for the last several months, him and Pierre would be having a toast at Mar-a-Lago right now. They'd be talking about how, they would basically be the newest member of the international fascist coalition, and things would look all the more grim for the rest of us. But again, if Trump hadn't got it into his head to start threatening Canada, to start, to talk about annexing them and punishing them with tariffs, if he hadn't put Canada on the defensive, he would have a new ally today. But he doesn't. And the reason for that is, Donald Trump is savvy in a lot of ways. And I think, sometimes we do try to lean a little too far into the fact that he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. On certain things, he's very sharp. He knows how to manipulate people. If he didn't, he wouldn't be the president right now. But his own conception of, reviving the kind of Pan America, manifest destiny politics of the 19th century, along with just using a stick, all stick, no carrots, has really come back to bite him in the butts. When now on both sides of the border, on to the south in Mexico, he's got a progressive Claudia Sheinbaum, and to the north, he's got a centrist whose entire campaign was about standing up to Donald Trump. He's basically Donald Trump has encircled himself through his own short-sightedness, trying to basically act like a king before he got the crown. So keep in mind, these are chinks in the armor that we should consider in the future, especially the way that I don't think Donald Trump's going to get any less belligerent in his foreign policy in the future. And while the political shift in Canada, we should also be a little cautious of. It's not that a whole bunch of Canadians suddenly got progressive, and we should really be alarmed that the Conservatives were 27 points up before Donald Trump shot himself in the foot. We should be deeply concerned about that because this election is basically a reaction of the Canadian people to Trump's belligerence. If that's going now, whether or not that can translate into a Canadian progressive movement is another thing entirely. Again, they have been let down by Trudeau, who, again, like many politicians before him, ran as a progressive, governed as a centrist. People generally do not like that. They get very disenchanted. And for the mass of people will just pull the other lever in the next election and hope for better results, which is exactly what would have happened had Trump not threatened to yoink Canada and make it in the 51st state. So whether Mr. Carney can actually translate this push for Canadian sovereignty and for standing up to Trump into an actual political program, particularly like an economic populist one, remains to be seen. Or Canada might be finding themselves in a similar situation to what America was in 2020, where again we had a president, Donald Trump, who was uniquely bad. We'd just gone through a once-in-a-century pandemic. We'd had uprisings happen all over the country. And Biden, to his minimal credit, did at least pretend that he was going to do some progressive stuff when he got elected. But that 4 years of disappointment over those failed promises, the genocide in Gaza, teed everything up for Donald Trump to get reelected in 2024. And Canada Looking at Canada right now, it remains to be seen whether in their next election, if Pierre or some other conservative is not going to also be able to take advantage of, excuse me, of the more liberal Mark Carney if he fails to deliver any real changes for Canadians that predated the current concern over Trump trying to yoink their land. Also, by the way, it's stupid to pick a fight with Canada anyway. If you see, yeah, those people. I know they have a, I know they have a reputation for being polite, but they'll have a scrap if you if you try to pick a fight with them. Like, into the laneway, don't come up the property. Anyway, all right, we're gonna take another quick little break. Come back. I've got some good news to tell y'all out there in Radio Land. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers Kalamazoo Podcast or on Facebook or YouTube. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Well, this next story, I want to bring you a little bit of good news. It is, again, the fruit of a lot of important organizing and agitation. And again, we get a ton of good news in these times. So anytime that we do, I really want to highlight it and let y'all know that, again, we're not just screaming into the void. We are rattling the cages in a good way. So this is an article from the Associated Press. It's published also on Bridge, Michigan. Written by Ron French, published on April 25th. Donald Trump restores student visas after revoking 70 plus in Michigan. At least 70 international students at Michigan colleges and universities marked for possible deportation appeared to get a reprieve on Friday, when federal officials announced plans to reverse termination of their legal status. A government lawyer for the Trump administration explained the policy shift Friday in California, where a judge was hearing one of dozens of lawsuits filed on behalf of some of the 1,100 international students nationwide who had lost their legal status. Although a lawsuit filed on behalf of Michigan's international students by the ACLU of Michigan was not among the cases in which the reversal was announced, the decision is expected to apply to all students nationally who had lost their legal status in recent weeks. A lawyer for the government read a statement in federal court in Oakland that said ICE was manually restoring the student status for people whose records were terminated in recent weeks. A similar statement was read by a government attorney in a separate case in Washington on Friday, said lawyer Brian Green, who represents the plaintiff in that case. Green said that the government lawyer said it would apply to all students in the same situation, not just those who had filed lawsuits. The reversal comes in the wake of judges around the country ruling against the federal government, issuing temporary orders that restore the students' records in a federal database of international students maintained by ICE. The records have been suddenly terminated in recent weeks, often without the students or their schools being notified or clear indication as to the reasons those students were singled out for potential deportation. Of course, to speculate, and this is not a wild speculation, considering we have quotes from the Secretary of State Mark Rubio talking about how they're going to go after maniacs who criticize the actions of the Israeli government, i.e., anti-genocide protesters. Anyway, going on. Some students whose visas were canceled were told their status was terminated as a result of a criminal records check. In Michigan, at least 4 students who faced possible deportation had records of past run ins with law enforcement or immigration officials, but none had been convicted or even charged with crimes. And this is like the same thing they're doing to Abrigo, which is to say, they basically they're not doing due process, and they're targeting basically anybody who is not European white. especially those who have been outspoken against the Israeli occupation and the genocide. And they basically make things up after the fact, saying like, "Oh, they had a criminal record," when in fact they did not. And anything they do cite is again a misinformed, deliberate misinformation about what their actual record is. However, this time it looks like a lot of these students are at least getting a reprieve for now, based on the fact that, yeah, again, none of them had those criminal records. Anyway, 11 of Michigan's public universities confirmed to Bridge, Michigan, that current or former students had lost their legal status in recent weeks, including 22 students at the University of Michigan, 12 at Wayne State University, and 12 at Michigan State University. And I believe there was at least 7 here at Western Michigan University. All the students, Michigan University officials identified by nationality, none came from predominantly white countries. Most were from China or countries in South Asia, Africa, or the Middle East. So, again, there's also a lot of this anti Chinese kind of Cold War Part 2 stuff going on here, in addition to targeting, pro Palestine or anti genocide protesters. Going on, while students affected by the revocations represent just a small fraction of the 38,123 international students enrolled in Michigan colleges and universities, advocates said they fear a chilling effect. Both colleges and companies rely heavily on international students and immigrant workers. Michigan State University President Kevin Guskowitz confirmed more than a dozen students at his school had their legal status restored Friday morning. We're very happy about that because these distractions become a challenge. I mean, our students are preparing their final exams next week. We want to celebrate the graduation next weekend. These distractions are really problematic, and so we are pleased to hear that news earlier. However, the reprieve could be temporary. A statement read by federal lawyers in court Friday said that ICE is developing a policy to provide a framework for the Federal Student and Exchange Visitor Information System to record terminations. Until such a policy is issued, the SAVIS records for plaintiffs in this case will remain active or shall be reactivated, not currently active, and ICE will not modify the record solely based on um, National Crime Information Center finding that resulted in recent SAVIS record termination, which is a lawyerly way of saying we might just start targeting them if they don't have a criminal record, just arbitrarily. It's kind of like they did to Mahmoud Khalil. Michigan Democrat U.S. Representative Debbie Dingell praised the reversal. This is the right decision to restore the visas of students that had been revoked suddenly and without explanation, many just weeks before they were supposed to graduate. Dingell, who represents the University of Michigan region, said in a statement, "International students who are in the U.S. legally for school deserve to continue their education without the fear that their visa might be revoked without warning or reason." So again, one thing that the article does not really emphasize, but I want to, is a lot of what the Trump administration has been doing is, again, they're testing the defenses, testing the infrastructure of the American judicial system, kind of seeing how far they can go on certain things. In this case, it's can we just arbitrarily cancel student visas and kind of see how much pushback we get? And the amount of pushback they got was at least sufficient for them to back off and recalibrate. And of course, they're going to try to do it again. But it is worth noting this stuff doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's not just because, oh, the right lawyers were in the right place to say the right thing. It is also because of the hundreds and thousands of student demonstrators and protesters who have been out in the streets standing up for their fellow international students. I don't know if it was a week or two ago, we had dozens and dozens of protesters out here right in front of the Student Center demanding that the administration, the WMU administration, stand up for their international students. Now, it might seem spurious to try to draw the line between this court decision and what happened just a few dozen feet in front of me last week or the week before. But I think it is fair to assume that, yeah, one protest in front of the Student Center here in Kalamazoo, Michigan, probably did not push the Trump administration to back off a little on these international students. But That demonstration out front here and out front at University of Michigan and Michigan State University and Wayne State University and every other university and school here in Michigan and around the country. All of that stuff adds up. I know it's very cynical, but we have to understand people do have power in this time. And I know a lot of that, it feels crushing. It feels impossible to stand up for our neighbors when, again, the corporate state apparatus is being really targeted against us. But again, when people do stand up and they agitate and especially have very specific targets, like I mentioned here at WMU, it wasn't just a bunch of kids like, oh, we're mad at the Trump administration being racist. It was very specific. What are you, the WMU administration, going to do to protect our fellow students? That kind of pointedness puts a sort of very specific institutional pressure that things like, honestly, like stuff like the 50-51 stuff necessarily doesn't. I have been a little critical of those big mass demonstrations because it feels more like a pressure release valve. It's people going out in the streets saying, boo, boo, Orange Man bad. But when you specifically target your local institution and you have demands, you can push what's the word? You can push them in ways you can't necessarily do the federal government. And all that stuff trickles up. WMU admin feels pressure. So does the one at U of M, MSU, Wayne State. Those municipalities start feeling pressure. That pressure trickles up. Even representatives who are totally on board with the Trump administration start feeling that heat when people come up in droves and they make those very specific demands and agitate at the local level. And I want to tip my hat to everybody who's been out there doing that these last few weeks, last few months, because that is how real change happens. And that is also how we stand up for each other in these increasingly fascistic times. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. We're also on Facebook and YouTube. We're going to take a short little break, come back. We've got some important statewide stories to talk about. Keep it dialogue. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIR or online at widerfm.org, joined by my co-host Lawrence. Lawrence, how you doing?
I'm all right, man. How are you?
Oh, it's good. It's a beautiful day out. I mean, there's a lot of foolishness here in Michigan I want to talk to you about now that I got you on the line here. But yeah, it's been beautiful weather. We're trying to enjoy it. Um, got some important stuff coming up this week. I'm going up to a workshop in Grand Rapids doing some tenants' rights stuff. I know you just got back last week. We were talking to you. You were up in Lansing doing some work on
Yeah,
gun violence, right?
yeah, gun violence and lobbying and CVI work. Because I'm a CVI worker for Griffin Place. So
Mhm.
so that bill and getting funding for that, also people getting people certified so that people aren't getting uh getting profiled by the cops, and also people know who to trust on in this line of work. So I mean, yeah, it was a lot of work. Also talking about funding for domestic violence shelters and fund and getting funding for that, because we also know that funding is also federal funding that our president chose to cut. So, we're just talking about the benefits of how this money is being used and how it positively affects our community. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, and it was pretty fun.
Oh yeah. So I think I want to talk to you about we've had we spent the first hour mostly talking about kind of the Trump administration and pushback against that. Um, let's pivot and talk a little bit about how, again, when it comes to a lot of the focus around fascism and authoritarianism has been around Donald Trump for obvious reasons, and his administration. But in some ways, the call is coming from inside the House, and even from people who once kind of positioned themselves as progressives. And if you haven't heard, earlier this week, there was an FBI backed raid on several households in the kind of Ann Arbor um, area, Washtenaw area. Uh,
Yeah, that was absolutely disgusting.
yeah.
That was nasty work.
And for reasons it's like, oh, well, what does Dana Nessel have to do with the FBI? Well, this action was not spurred by the FBI. It was done at Dana Nessel's specific request. For those who know, we've talked about this on the show. Dana Nessel is pursuing criminal charges against several anti-genocide protesters from the University of Michigan, and 11 of them at the time. And yeah, it was on, I believe it was last week, I think around the 23rd, where they raided, uh, I believe it was two different residences. They damaged property inside the house. There's literally a video of them using one of their battering rams to get inside. Individuals were handcuffed without charges during the raids, and they took some of their phones, laptops, and other digital equipment. Um, and as I'm going to quote from uh, CAIR, which is an organization here in Michigan standing against anti-Arabic. It's the Council on American Islamic Relations, and what they had to say. We call into question the aggressive nature of this morning's raids of activist homes, which follow the recent misuse of prosecutorial power in Michigan against pro-Palestinian activists. In any other context, minor infractions, which again, they're prosecuting people for potential vandalism, and again, non-violent offenses. Um, in any other context, such infractions would be handled by local law enforcement or referred to local elected prosecutors, not escalated to federal intervention. This disproportionate response further fuels the perception that Muslim and Arab students and those who stand in solidarity with them are being treated overly hostile by law enforcement compared to those who commit harm toward American Muslims. Which again, there have been provocateurs at some of these protests, Zionists who well documented coming in trying to beat people up, agitate people. I haven't seen Dana Nessel like relay any charges against them. I know this is maybe more infamous at what happened at what was it, Cambridge, but the stuff like that was happening at University of Michigan as well. And also, Dana Nessel's, especially since October 7th, is not, for somebody who has positioned themselves as a progressive prosecutor, is definitely part of that PEFP group, progressive except for Palestine. And in this particular case, is using her power to, again, prosecute college students who are expressing their First Amendment rights to call out a genocide. Um, and again, it is really sickening because this is the kind of fascism that Dana Nessel is talking out of two sides of her mouth. On one hand, she is it's like I'm going to use the power of the prosecutor to stand against these illegal actions by the Trump administration, defend DEI, all this other stuff, while at the same time engaging in illegal fascist actions herself, going after peaceful protesters. Again, Lawrence, kind of maybe what you have to say about it. I'm
I
mad.
mean,
I donated money to her once. I want it back. Where's my refund? This is gross. This is
I absolutely agree with you. So let's be clear on this action, right? That she's okay with. If these college students were protesting the coup that we tried to do in Venezuela, right? She wouldn't have any issue with it. This type of action wouldn't be taking place against these students. If those students were protesting uh, guns on campus, right? We know that school shootings happen a lot, right? So they were protesting against violence and community violence and guns near campus uh, and wanting to get a comprehensive gun legislation. No issue. If she wanted to protest the president was to come to that school and they were to protest against him, there wouldn't be an FBI raid on these protesters. But these protesters are going against Israel and they're going against the Israel lobby. They want to stop a genocide that's taking place with our taxpayer money, right? Because we're giving money to that genocide. They get the FBI cracking down on their house. How is this any different, in my opinion, to what the FBI was doing with COINTELPRO to the Black Panthers? How is this any
Mhm.
different than than when the police bombed an apartment complex in the 80s, or it was 86? The black separatist group that was in the apartment complex in Philadelphia, the cops literally firebombed that apartment complex. I mean, we could go all the way back to to 1910 and 1930s, 1910. We can all go all the way back then. Like I just got done watching Sinners. This is fascist, authoritarian, right wing ideology that is protecting the fascist authoritarian state of Israel. The that Americans cannot protest, cannot bring awareness to a situation, and that the government is using their power and state sanctioned violence to silence the voices of students, not billionaires, not people who are actively trying to overthrow the government. They're not going after the Proud Boys. They're not going after the Oath Keepers. They're not going after the Klan. They're going after student protesters.
That's a very good point. Dana Nessel was in office in 2020 when they came here to town. I didn't see her bringing suit to them when they were
Dog,
rampaging around, beating people up downtown. Um,
dog, Dana Nessel was, correct me if I'm wrong, but she was around during COVID. She saw when these people tried to kidnap the governor. So we have grace and leniency for right wing fascists. We have grace and leniency when the protesters are not affecting the economic redistribution of wealth, or we apply the same vitriol that to these student protesters that we saw to Black Lives Matter protesters, that we saw to Me Too protesters, that we saw to Black Panther protesters. Like the government will always side with fascists when fascists are in power. And
yeah. Mhm.
Dana is proving this.
Yeah,
And
it's particularly difficult because or difficult to watch because, again, this is somebody who, when they originally ran, was really leaning into the progressive bona fides. A lot of people who had been involved with the Bernie Sanders movement were directly involved in their campaign, and she's gone from I'm going to be like a statewide Larry Krasner to I'm going to be like a petty J. Edgar Hoover. It's a heel turn
yeah,
that I'm like probably the only good comparison I can think is like John Fetterman, but apparently she didn't need any
yeah,
head injury to become
yeah,
a fascist prosecutor. But
yeah, she is. She's doing a fantastic heel turn. Like you said, like it, even if even I want to give her grace. I want to give her the most grace in the world. But we saw her slander Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, right? When they criticized Israel's genocide, and she basically threw Rashida Tlaib under the bus. You know, like Rashida, don't like Rashida. Representative Rashida Tlaib accurately said that what was going on was a genocide, and Dana chose to throw another person from her state, a Detroit representative, under the bus,
Hmm.
and it
Misrepresenting their words deliberately too.
deliberately. And now she's okay with the FBI without a warrant. Again, they didn't have a warrant. They didn't have a reason to detain these people outside of they were leaders of a protest against the genocide. Like Dana, I like Dana. I voted for Dana, but Dana might need to go.
Mm,
She might need to
yeah.
be replaced with
Hmm.
with a better progressive who has clear moral values.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into our next topic. Speaking of people who need to be replaced, uh, so some of you may have heard last week, Elissa Slotkin, I believe she was profiled in it was Politico, if I remember correctly. But she had some very interesting things to say, and this is not too far off the mark of some of the things she said about like, I have work to do in Washington, and I don't have time to go on like a tour to talk about how bad Trump is, whatever. Got a little sniping pot shots at the
She she
oligarchy, fight
she
oligarchy
yeah,
tour.
yeah, she gave her retort to what she thinks the fight oligarchy tour should be, or how progressives should fight back against uh the fascism that we have in our country today. And her retort was, we shouldn't call it oligarchy, that Americans don't understand what that is. That uh
You sure
that
about
we
that?
that
You sure?
yeah, yeah, the John Cena meme come out of nowhere, you know what I'm saying? Uh it is disrespectful to tell Americans who are seeing now prices on goods and Family Dollar and at Walmart and at Myers are all going up. Gas prices are now going up. It is insulting to the average American that you're supposed to be talking to, who's seeing their prices going up, to say that they don't understand what the word oligarchy is, or that we should be saying kings, that we need to be more patriotic. You know what? Saying that we should be that Democrats should take the mantle back of being patriotic, I have no problem. I have no problem with. My issue, when you're saying that we should say that we're against kings and not the oligarchy, you're taking a class narrative that is about rich people, a rich group of billionaires, which is what we have in this country, having overwhelming power and influence over our system of government for the benefit of themselves. This is what our system is, and that's what most people understand. They understand that even if they don't know what the word oligarchy is. To say that we need to dumb it down, one, insults the intelligence of Americans. You know what? You want to do that? That's fine. It just is what it is. But two, now you're taking away that class issue so that you don't have to change it. Every time she has spoken about that subject, notice there is not a policy associated with any of the things that she's talking about. She doesn't bring up Medicare for all. She doesn't talk about Green New Deal. She doesn't even do what Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks is doing, which is the rebellion pack, and saying that we're just going on popular. Uh, we're running Democrats on a populist plank, right? So paid family leave, paid sick leave, universal health care, free college tuition, a living wage that's tied to inflation, right? None of the policies that actually would positively affect the material conditions of her constituents she's talking about. But she wants to critique the rhetoric and strategy of progressives who are actually fighting back against the establishment, like Bernie and AOC and others. When we read the letter from the Birmingham jail that Martin Luther King talked about, the white moderate, and how the white moderate stands in the way of progress for the Black Americans, expand that. Elissa Slotkin, people like her, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer's, Nancy Pelosi's, and others, they are the white moderates. They are the moderates, center moderates who stand in the way of progress for the rest of us disenfranchised folks because they have a financial interest to do so. Melissa Slotkins voted for every single one of Trump's cabinet picks. If she was truly about that business, she wouldn't have given not one of them her vote. Melissa
Mhm.
Slotkin has taken money from APAC and other groups. If she was really about that business, about fighting back against the establishment, more money wouldn't be going to a slaughter of brown and black people in a country that didn't attack us, or giving that money to allies. That money would be going back into bringing businesses back into Michigan, into the state of Michigan. She's not talking about that. If Alyssa Slotkin actively has campaigned against other progressive candidates like Abdul Al Saeed, and saying that their strategy of advocating for Medicare for all and other policies uh, are hurting the Democratic Party when she takes money from big pharma corporations.
I want to
So
stress with that too. Let's, because Slotkin is very much like she is just completely tied to this Clintonite way of thinking. It reminded me a lot of so a lot of fascist groups like the Threepers and the Proud Boys have this concept of being men against time. Like we are going to stand up against change and try to rewind the clock back to when things were quote unquote better. And it sounds ridiculous. It's like I'm gonna go get in a fist fight with the wind. And I was thinking about like fascism and the ideologies around fascism. It really, Alyssa Slotkin feels like she's trying to be a woman against time. She is trying to rewind the clock back to not only the politics of the 90s but the Reagan style politics of the 80s. And again, in the face of we have proof every election in the 20th century that Democrats have won, it's when they have been at least pretending that they are going to do progressive policies and pushing those. A thing a lot of people forget, Biden in 2020 was ceding a lot of ideological and platform planks to the Bernie Sanders wing in order to win that election. Now, he didn't really follow through on it like he should have, but he was making that promise. Elissa Slotkin, again, ignores that history and is trying to push this counter narrative for the benefits of her campaign donors who really who would rather the Democrats just be the more moderate wing of capitalism. I also,
she would rather have the fascists be she would rather fight to make sure that the fascists stay in power than to ally with the people who are expanding the class consciousness of the country.
and
She would.
I wanted to know one other thing, and I hoped you had some maybe want to discuss this a little bit deeper. But the other thing Alyssa Slotkin said, which maybe didn't get quite as much attention, she said the Democratic Party needs to stop being weak and woke. And
Mm.
that infuriated me so much because, one, so much of what the fascist right is doing is attacking institutions they perceive as woke. They're attacking DEI. Which is basically a way of attacking authentic history. Also, again, to repeat that really disgusting Republican talking point, which again is co-opting AAVE. That and I mean, we could talk about this a little bit deeper, but it's co-opting AAVE as a placeholder because when the right wing fascists don't want to basically say a racial slur, they say woke. And when Alyssa Slotkin is using that kind of language, it's like we should negotiate with the fascists about how much history to erase. It is it was like so gross and disgusting, not only on a strategic level, but also on a moral level. And as somebody like I
It
grew
is
up.
reframing and reinforcing the right wing ideology and their position on something that wasn't even theirs to begin with. It is recolonizing, it's colonizing something that's not theirs. For those who do not know, the word woke or staying woke, which was the original term, was a term created out of the civil rights movement. It was created during a time during in a time where people were saying you need to stay aware and be in stay aware and be aware of things that are going on in the world so that we can better change it. It was a term that uh that revolutionaries used, black revolutionaries and their co-conspirators, because it wasn't just black people that was also using that term. What we have now seen, and this is the thing that has made me the most infuriated when I hear it, is that people will use woke, like how you said, they will use it as a way to say black, as a way to say LGBT, as a way to say, um, they will use it as a stand in for the things that they don't like. And others have helped co opt this. Bill Maher and Joe Rogan and others have helped to take a phrase that was about being aware of what's going on so that we can better change it, to make it the gotcha for Republicans to say, oh my God, this is woke, this is bad, this is the evils of the world, instead of actually looking at the evils of the world. And that's the thing for me that bothers me the most. Outside of the fact that obviously this CIA agent is not one of us. They not like us.
No.
She's not like us, right?
Yep.
And that she is the type of candidate that James Carborough and others like. And shout out to David Hogg, and I want to shout out to David Hogg, vice president of the DNC right now, chair of the DNC. Uh, and when he said that no, we're gonna primary do nothing Democrats because we need better people to fight against fascism. She's the kind of person that says, "Oh my God, why are you trying to divide the party? You're hurting our feelings." Like that's that type of person. And the reason why they're doing that, as my mama would say, a hit dog holler. If you feel like that you've been doing your thing, you've been helping your constituents, you've really been on your P's and Q's, you've been fighting, you shouldn't be worried about a primary. But these type of people, they want to protect power. And that's how we got here. That's how we're here now. It's because those cowards want to protect power.
Hmm. Well, Lawrence, do you know who should be worried about a primary right now?
Uh,
This next story has two parts. But we're going to talk about Shri Thanedar, who we haven't talked about in several years. When
last time we talked about Sharice was when what was it, David Benack and Matt Longjohn, they were all running. That was when we were back in
It
the old
was
studio.
the same election cycle, yeah. But
Yeah.
he's probably most infamous for, spoiler man does whatever a
Yeah.
spoiler can, which is to say,
Facts.
now crystal ball, we can't say Abdul Saeed, El Saeed would have won that primary if she hadn't
Oh,
been in
oh
it,
no,
but,
no, no. I'm gonna
but
say it. He
yeah,
would have won.
yeah.
Let me be very clear.
Mhm.
He would have won, and we wouldn't have Miss Whitmore. And again, I love Big Gretch, but Big Gretch wouldn't be hiding behind binders in the White House. We wouldn't have, Abdul wouldn't have went to the White House. He wouldn't have went to the White House looking crazy and been a prop of the right wing government. Like Gretchen
We
Gretchen
certainly would have
destroyed.
gotten a lot more progressive stuff done during the trifecta. I can tell you that
Dog,
much.
absolutely. Gretchen hurt her because Gretchen wants to run for president. She hurt her chances. She hurt her chances badly. And I'm saying that as someone who I voted for Abdul, but I wasn't mad at Gretchen. Now I'm like, nah, now I'm mad. Like, bruh, what are you doing? What are you doing? But anyway, that's not. But yeah, spoiler man is this rich billionaire has a primary opponent, a young black man who's a community organizer, who's a father. I forgot his name. I had his name pulled up. Um,
Sorry, Donovan McKinney,
yeah,
and
his
yep,
attack ad against spoiler man is good. It's good. I saw it. I was like, I like it. I want
hmm
that kind of energy. We need that kind of energy all day. The
yeah,
fact that
yeah,
he said that rich prick has more in common with Trump and Doge than he does than the average Michigander. I was like, who? I was like,
yeah.
who?
The dude
Injected into my
is
veins.
he's like the dictionary definition of a carpetbagger, which
Yeah,
if you're not familiar with that political term, it's basically some outside person or presumptive politician who moves to a new place and tries to get in a position of power or get elected to something. With again, not really having an organic relationship or long stayed position in the place where they are moving or running for office. Again, Shri tried to do that very overtly in that primary a few years ago, and he was able to buy himself a seat in 2022 in the Detroit area. But yeah, as McKinney pointed out, this is somebody who does not have an actual relationship with his constituents. He's somebody more interested in their political power, and even some of the background we've talked about. I think he described Shri Thanedar as like Detroit's Elon Musk. And I think that's a pretty apt metaphor because he is a goofy billionaire who's made a lot of weird and dumb decisions. And he's also backed by a lot of money. So one thing the Intercept article really points out is um, APAC um, has donated money in sorry, when Thanedar had a challenger in the last Democratic primary, APAC spent about $2.3 million to make sure Shri could hold on to their seat. So they are also another politician who's kind of in the pocket of the Israeli state. And in addition to again kind of prioritizing he this sort of kind of libertarian flair of the Democratic Party, which is like the absolute last thing we need um, in today's politics. Um, so yeah, again, they so McKinney put out this really strong ad against Shri. It was resonating with people. How does Shri bury the lead? How's a good way to distract people away from this? Well, just a couple of days later, you may have heard Shri Thanedar filed articles of impeachment against Trump, specifically citing the deportation of Kilmore Abrego Garcia and the Doge and cutting funds without congressional approval. Now, it's important for me to point out he's not the only Democrat who's done that. We also have Al Green was presented articles of impeachment. But let's, look, here's my take on it. Some might read it as a little cynical, but this seems to me like a big publicity stunt. The timing of it is really suspect. He just got a primary challenger from somebody who is organically part of Detroit's community organizers backed by Justice Democrats. And all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, I'm going to put in articles of impeachment against Trump," which again we don't have the numbers for that to actually go forward. And Al Green did not, in contrast, Al Green did not do it for any immediate political benefit. You could tell he did it for, again, moral reasons. Somebody who's being a stick in the Trump, a thorn in the side of the Trump administration actually got him in some degree of trouble with both sides of the aisle.
like
Whereas,
I like Shri is a less like. Sorry to interrupt, but Shri is less like Elon, and he's more like who's that? George Santos, the one who just got locked up for 7 years.
oh
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
He's
yeah, the serial
Shri
liar
is a
dude.
lot like no. Shri is a lot like George Santos. You don't know where he's gonna be on issues because the donors or the consultants haven't told him yet. He doesn't stand for actually anything. He's a rich oligarch that bought his seat. He didn't even donate. He just bought his seat. That's it. That's it. The man the man is everything that's wrong with this country. And I say that not to be like on some not to I say that not to be hyperbolic. I'm saying that in the way that like no, when we think about the things that we talk about, money and politics and how it corrupts our system, yeah, he is that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at like even okay, that primary I mentioned, Whitmer versus Abdul El Said. I don't again, Whitmer was more of the centrist in that election. Those are politics I disagree with, but there was at least like Whitmer had ideological commitments. So did Abdul. He had an ideological commitment to being a progressive candidate. Shri had no such thing. He was all over the place. He didn't really know the difference between any of that stuff. He just wanted one day his rich dopey self said it'd be fun to run for governor. If he was actually progressive, he would have pooled his resources toward Abdul. But he was more concerned with getting in a position of power, even though he had no real good idea of how to do it other than to just muck up what was really a two-person race.
Pretty much. He is he's not about that. He's not about actually making change for the better. He's about financial advancement for himself.
A hundred
Um
percent.
yeah. I gotta dip out. Love you though. Got love y'all. Peace.
All
Much
right.
love.
Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us. And I think we'll take a quick little break. We got one or two more stories here. But thanks for the discussion. We'll be right back. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. You can find us on most podcasting apps or Facebook or YouTube. Keep it on lock. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution.